Okay, guys, at least from next time, please try to join using your Riser ID, or else I'll have to keep giving admit. I'm more surprised that you are all using your personal email ID more than your Riser ID. So, yeah. Uh, I guess we'll start now. Hello, everyone. I hope you're all awake and your ears are also pretty much awake. Yeah, I didn't have to admit you. So, yes. Uh, okay, welcome to the next seventh alumni session. I haven't been doing the introduction, so I'm kind of forgetting about things. God, so stick. Okay. Yep. So the Anuradha handle it. Thanks.
So, Jessica, Jessica, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Yes.
Okay. Am I visible? I think I am. Wait. I'll prefer to keep my camera off. I'm not sure if my voice will break in between, so bear with me. Yeah, hello everyone. First of all, thanks a lot for making this. It's 10:30 here and late night for Anurag. So I, on behalf of the whole science club, welcome you to this Illumina session with Anurag Agrawal, a scientist at Illumina who is working on surface modification for DNA. And this Illumina session, it is special because he has done his PhD already and he's working in industry right now. So please feel free to ask any query, any questions you have. And he is a super intelligent person. He got perfect in SGPA for 2 semesters. He got like I think he did various internship in India and outside India. He got NIUS he attended biology camp in the first year itself. So it's a golden opportunity for you all to ask questions. So please feel free to ask.
Thanks, Jessica, for the introduction. I won't. It's hard to sort of hear those things about myself. But yeah, I mean, if you guys want, I can start with like a just a little bit of introduction about myself, and then I think you guys can
Yeah,
ask
yeah, yeah.
questions
You
based
can
on it.
share your journey from Isa to the present place.
Sure. So yes, I was in the 2009 batch. So that time ISER was just 5 years old. So we were the fifth batch. So there was the one class that was about to graduate, but no one has graduated yet. So it was still very new, very fresh. A lot of us weren't sure before joining what we are getting into, but it was something that we were interested in, and just based on some of the publicity that was going on, and just some of the waves that were going on, people were excited about it. A lot of things changed from that. ISER has grown to a really established institute from that point onwards. But yeah, so when we started, we didn't have like sort of a defined major policy. We just chose our, I think, which still probably happens to a certain extent. But the first 2 years we were doing everything, just taking all the courses, and then eventually you start taking more specialized courses. Um, when I was in ISER, just based on academic part of my things, I was just involved a little bit, just with the alumni or just people in other ISER. So I got to know some more opportunities. So I started applying for some of the internships, as Jessica was mentioning. I started with NIUS. So that happens in Mumbai. So TIFR, HBCSC. So that's where the camp happens. So there is a camp in winter, and then eventually do the whole internship. So that's what I did for the first I think second year of my time there. Then I was selected for DART, which is the Germany, DART wise internship. So that's where I went to Germany. So I was in University of Göttingen. Um, did 3 months there. Worked with peptide nucleic acid synthesis. Just something very new. I never did that before, but it was a really good experience there. Came back next year. I went to Canada. So there was an internship there. Um, I was in University of Toronto. York University is sort of an extension. That's where again I worked a little bit on mass spectrometry. Again, some of those things which are not directly correlated, but it was just good to have this diverse experience. And as you'll see in my journey, that has been a common theme, that I've just had some diverse experiences wherever I've been. So that was my fourth year. Last year I was in SG3 Western Search Lab, so that's where I did my fifth year thesis. After that, I started applying to some of the universities. I got admit uh, for a PhD program into University of Wisconsin-Madison. So that was pretty highly ranked for chemical biology and biochemistry, that the stuff that I was really interested in doing. So that worked out. Went there, I was I the way the university system works there, you just have around 3 weeks rotations in each of the labs. So around 3 months or so, you can decide finally which lab you want to join. So I figured out, this is the area that I'm interested in. So we were working on a little bit of a interface between chemistry and biology. So it was single cell imaging. So there was a lot of analytical stuff, but a little bit of interface of everything. We were working on these alternate peptides. So these had promises against antibacterial resistance. So that's what I did for my PhD. While I was doing my PhD, I knew pretty early on that I didn't want to stay in academia for long. So I started working towards getting an industrial job. So I started looking into how I can build my skill set, how can I network, how can I do things to make myself qualified for that. So while I was doing before finishing up, I actually did get a chance to do another internship that was in an industry. So company Roche, probably some of you guys have heard of it. It's a really big pharmaceutical company. So I went there and did a 3 month internship there as well. Really helped, just make it solidified that I wanted to go into industry. And then I was able to finish my PhD in around four years and a few months. And then I started working, got a job opportunity here in San Diego, California, and I'm working with now a company called Illumina. They're pretty big in DNA sequencing. So all the things that you are hearing about, let's just for an example, all of the things that you are hearing about COVID mutation, how do you figure out if the mutation is happening or not, right? So that happens using DNA sequencing. So all the instrument, all the technology is made by Illumina. So the company is growing in that space, and I have been working with them for now 2.5 years or so. Started as a scientist one, which is the starter roles for a PhD, and then I got promoted last year to a higher role, so scientist two. So that has been my journey in a nutshell. But happy to answer any questions you guys have, and we can go deep dive. We can dive deeper into any of these things if you are interested.
Hi, Anurag. Uh, this is Akash from so I'm currently the fifth year student. Uh, uh, so yeah, I mean, thanks a lot for having your time over here. So I'm also kind of I'm from the physics background actually, and kind of I am considering the industrial option as one of the option. So very first elementary question, what's your thought on say looking for some job, no, industrial job, let's say, after just the fifth year versus the after doing a PhD itself. Yeah, what do you think about it?
Sure. Thanks for the question, Akash. Also, whenever people ask this question, it will be really helpful for me to know what year are you guys in currently. But I'll answer generally. When we were starting up, right? Of course, as I told you, it was a very new institute, right? We were sort of pioneers in a lot of things. We were trying to figure things out of ourselves. So we were, I think, the first one. We started doing this career center, right? At that point, and we were interested because I mean, at that point, you are comparing yourself to people in, let's say, your contemporaries, right, which are probably in engineering or in some other institutes, and they are looking for a placement right after college.
Right.
So that was uh, a choice for a lot of people. But very quickly I realized that the options were limited, especially the way it was working in India in terms of science, and the opportunities there were in terms of how many companies they are there, and what kind of job you will end up doing. So we had some companies. There was, I think, L'Oreal that came. Not even L'Oreal. I think some cosmetic company. And then there was these companies. It's called Hey Math and like some other companies. Basically, they were making digital platform for teaching. So there was not any core sort of a job that the companies companies that were coming on campus. So we had our options limited. I don't know how much that has changed since
It has not changed
yeah,
much. Yeah.
since I'm graduated. So I mean, so that's the part of it, right? I mean, it is something, that is a disadvantage, in the sense that if I have to say there is a disadvantage, I think that's I feel like is something, that the institute as a whole can work on, and try to see if there are opportunities there. But there is also the other side of it, is just by nature of it, in India there are not a lot of research going on. A lot of research is happening in one of these countries, either Europe or USA. In that sense, a lot of like companies are making their products here. So I quickly realized that. But then I was like, okay, what's my next option? And I mean, it is in the sense that I made peace with it in the way that when you are graduating, you are like 23 to like around, you're not that old. I mean, in that sense, in the sense like, okay, even if your colleagues are doing it, I was like, okay, you at that point, it's good to take some time to explore and really see if you want to go to an industry or not, or maybe academy an option for you, or you do really like the research environment or not. So that's why I went in that PhD path. Once you go into that path, and I mean, it's never easy. It's never easy at any point. I mean, especially you just look at how many people graduate from a PhD program, even from a PhD program, and how many jobs are there. You will have to put an effort in, but it does get better. It does get better. I mean, I think I'll tell you from my perspective also, just in terms of looking for jobs. I think that was your original question. For I don't have that much experience right after college, especially from IISER Pune. But if you are interested, what I will suggest is reach out to people um, from programs that do have placements. So, for example, if you go to a BSMS program or like a master's program in one of the IITs, right? They probably don't have that many core placements going on, but there are other paths that you can explore. So that will be a good way to network if you know people in one of these programs and that they can help you out. But after PhD, then there can be more sort of structure approach to it. So if you already know that you are going for an industry eventually, so while you are applying for PhD, just look for the lab that you are interested in and where their alumni ended up being. There are some labs which a lot of alumni do not end up in a in an industry, right? Some labs are very research focused and they eventually go into an academic path. So then you probably don't want to sort of go into that. But if there are labs where most of the people have ended up in an industrial job, those will be a really good place to start, because that connection really helps you out, and then other people are already in these companies and that helps you out. So I think that's the approach going into PhD. And of course, once you are we can talk about like once you are near your PhD graduation, how do you look for job and what are those. But going into that, I think that's what I'll say.
Right. So for looking for a PhD, the most important thing is to look a correct, I mean, sort of quote unquote correct group, so which gives you kind of a good opportunity to.
If you are interested, if you already know that eventually you want to end up in an industry, I think that's a good place to start.
So, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, go for it.
So you have been in like in this kind of industrial world for a while now. So this is like not related to your work. So yeah, but so we are like this theory people who like, so I've done only theory projects throughout my 5 years at ICER. What kind of opportunities do you see for theory people like yeah. It's kind of a very bad question, I would say, to ask, but yeah, I mean, still, it's
No, no,
yeah.
no, I understand where you're coming from. So it depends. I mean, even with theory, it depends, right? I mean, I think so. You said you are in your fourth year, no?
Fifth year, fifth year.
Fifth year. So yeah, so I mean, yeah. Otherwise, I would have said like in the last year, you can probably try to get some skills. It's okay. I think then what could happen? I mean, there are two parts of it. Even you can, in your ideal scenario, you would want to join a lab where people eventually after PhD end up in an industry, but they will also look at what you have done already, right? Before you get an admit there. So then you can if you are really interested and you have identified areas where you can find a transit, where there is some little bit of a theory and little bit of applied, then probably that could be a transition. And once you are in that lab, that gives you a little bit freedom to gain more skills while you have those times, 4 or 5 years of your time. Then you can start getting more skills. And I have seen people even who have done theory that they eventually do end up in industry. But then you'll have to just, while you are there for your tenure of 4 or 5 years, you'll have to really focus on that. And usually the universities here, and I'll give example of universities here in USA. They usually have these programs built in. There is a strong network, a strong alumni network, or a strong um, collaborations that are happening within the lab that you can actually try to find opportunities to, and then that's how you can do the transition. But it's not like, just to sort of in a nutshell, not all hope is lost, in the sense that, I mean, it's okay even if you I didn't I mean I'm saying it after being in industry. But while I was going into the PhD, I was not thinking that much in advance, right? I was not thinking like, where do people end up. When the lab that I ended up going, they had like half and half. Most of the like half of those ended up in an industry, and half of them did not. But to be really honest, in the industry that I eventually joined, it just was not related to what I was doing in my PhD. So it all depends. Then while you are there, how do you sort of position yourself into? So so then my advice will be to, now when you look for it, you can try to find labs which are in a transitional, where you can have some sort of an interface. And I think that could still work out.
Yeah. So just to ask one more point, how do you compare these opportunities in USA versus Europe in general?
So that's a good question. I mean, I think one advice I'll personally give you, I think this used to come up a lot. People used to think a lot about 4 or 5 years in USA versus 3 years in Europe,
Right.
and how will that. I think in your career at long term, those 1 or 2 years, I personally think don't matter that much. So that shouldn't be a criteria. Now the criteria should be what I was initially saying, in my opinion, that if there are labs which have those opportunities. People I'll People from my batch, I think everyone had their struggle, but everyone did end up eventually in a career that they wanted to do. Some people did have to change their field. So some people had to change, from doing so as you were saying, very theoretical, to actually just changing to a data science role, or to like an analytical role. So it's not science at all, but which is okay, right? But that time will come, and then if you apply yourself, eventually you will get that. In US, the only issue is sometimes, eventually your immigration visa policies. So sometimes,
Yeah.
after 5 years, and then those eventually can play into your career. But no one knows what's going to happen in 5 years, right? So I mean, if you get a good university, if it is in USA, right? I mean, they do carry some weight. So even if you have to then transition into somewhere else, you can do it. It can again be a little bit complicated with your immigration. But in my mind, I just basically went with. So I did apply to some universities in Canada. I did not apply to Europe. I only applied to universities in Canada. I did get into some good universities offer from there. So then eventually my eventual decision was based on, from my program, what university was highly ranked, what was known, and then I went from that mentality. Um, and then eventually, of course, I worked. Sorry, there might be a dog. Um, but yeah, so just to answer your question, I think both of them is okay. It might also, in the end, depend on what the competition is out there when you are applying for it. You'll have to keep all of your options open. But I won't pay too much attention to number of years. I think the opportunities eventually do sort of work out themselves. So I think that should not be an issue.
Right. Right. Yeah, thanks. And also, if you have some time, you can also, like, so you said, right? I mean, you started looking. So first of all, you said that you were very clear that you don't wanted to go into academia, and hence you started looking for the industrial opportunity. So A, why you decided not to pursue academia, and B, how did you looked into the opportunities? Like, what was the process of it?
Yeah, so that's a loaded question. In terms of how I decided that I don't want to be in academia. So I quickly realized, I mean, everyone has their own opinion, but like I quickly realized, even once I started doing my PhD, within 4, 5, 6 months of it, like like the way I worked, right? I eventually was like, what is the criteria for success in academia, right? I mean, in terms of, is it number of publication, is it number of how fast, like what and it's very very subjective. There is not like an objective sort of way to define your success in academia in my mind. The only way it works, which is I commend people who do it, is that they love what they are doing. So if you are in love with your research and you really want to, enjoy your time in lab in a way, then just you just apply yourself, you are trying to find solutions to a problem, then it works out for you. There are other factors that come with it. It takes a while, sometimes, in terms of, if you compare pay, if you compare all the other things, that might be different. Eventually if you become a professor, then things work out. But those are the factors. So for some people it might not be a factor, for some people it can be. So after all these factors, I was like, I don't know if I am, first of all, good enough in the sense that I can just keep on having that sustained success, where you are still, my advisor was 60 years old in my PhD, and he was still worrying about funding, and he needs to fund his lab. I didn't want to be in that boat. I didn't want to be that old and still looking for things like that. But it's not to say, not to sort of demean people what do this. It's commendable. It's great. We need people like that, and some people can do it. So that's not to take away anything from them, but for my own personal, the way I worked, I like to work on, there is this aim that we are going for. We need to deliver on this particular project or particular product eventually. So that's how I like to work. So that I quickly realized in 6 7 months. So for some people it does take a while. Some people, they do take 2 or 3 years, and I am also not saying that you do need to decide that early, because it's, in the end, it's your career. It's, in the end, you will probably be doing that for a long time in your career. So that's why it's okay to take them time. For me, that realization happened pretty quickly, just based on the factors that I described. Once I knew, then I started going into just some of the things that I could do with in the campus. So then there used to be all the career events. There used to be companies that will sometimes come into the campus. Chemistry wasn't that great in terms of on-campus placement, but then I started seeking out other networks, right? Um, so that slowly I started working on towards that. It's a long time. 4 or 5 years is a good amount of time. You also have to do your PhD work, right? So you don't have all the time in your world. But I mean, you can, once you set up your mind to it, you can start thinking about other stuff. I also did realize pretty quickly that it's not gonna be a cakewalk, right? It takes a while, especially if you are international student, right? If you are not from here, so all these immigration things that do play a part. So then I did open myself to not technical roles, so, anything which, as I was saying earlier, right? Some people I know have friends who have shifted towards data science, analytical things like that. So I started just seeing like what other skills I can pick up. So I was really interested into the business side of things. So then I started looking into that also. Sometimes with your coursework, you can choose some courses in other departments. So I started taking some courses in the business school. I started this consulting club. So some of those things I started doing. I don't know how much of an impact that all made. In the end, I think it was just the different skill set that I eventually picked up through internships, through diverse set. But it's really hard to pinpoint what is that factor that helps you get a job. But it does help once you are in that mindset and you are doing everything in your power to do that from the beginning of it. The process that if I had to go back and look at it and do it again, what I'll do it in my first, second year of PhD, I'll start looking at, let's say there are like these 10 companies in my field. What are the jobs that are coming out from those companies? What are their usual requirements? Where is my skill set gap? Can I use 3 years of my PhD that is left to pick up that skill set? If my lab does not provide it, can I start a collaboration? And those things are usually doable, especially in an environment like this here. If you know what you are doing. So that's the process. But again, it's a while for you guys to get there. I think if you quickly realize that in your last year that it's getting difficult to get a job right out of college, and even if you get it, it's not going to fulfill you, then I think your focus should be more towards making a good SOP, making a good, just figuring out your recommendation letter, figuring out if your PhD, um, target schools, and then that's where your focus should be, and then eventually when you are there, then you can focus on what I already described.
Thanks a lot. That was
Mhm.
very helpful.
Of course.
So as a follow-up question, and then we will take the chat box question also. So my question is like, how did your academic experience help you in finding your job?
Yeah, that's a good point, right? I mean, I think so. I'll be honest with you. Sometimes I do struggle with it, especially because if I look at the work that I'm doing currently, it's not entirely correlated with what I have done in the past, right? But and that it's not also like that's always what companies look for. Sometimes they do look for a very specific skill set. So it just depends. However, if you don't have that skill set, you cannot just sit at home, right? You still need to apply to these things. Still need to apply to jobs. For me, in the end, it worked out that I had just had these diverse experiences. So, for example, I was telling you in the beginning, right? When I was doing my undergrad from IISER Pune, right? I of course had my coursework. I had my thesis experience, but also I did these three internships, and those all were at a little bit of a different field in chemistry. So then I had those skill sets also. So that I used that to make my SOP to sort of convey that point, that I can quickly learn, quickly gain some skill sets, and then I have this diverse knowledge that, and I can apply to a new project, and that probably helped me get a PhD position. Once I was in my PhD, then there was a combination of it, right? There was a combination of what I actually learned to my PhD, and then also like what a PhD teaches you. So PhD eventually, I feel like in my mind, apart from all the hard skills that you learn, the technical skills, that also teach you other stuff, which is how to be a problem solver. You will be always having issues with your PhD. You'll mostly be driving your project yourself, uh, which companies value. So, they do value that. So that helped. So in terms of academic part, that you are asking, Anuradha, I think the internship, the diverse experiences, the ability to quickly learn, um, and sort of just wherever I went, I was able to perform. I think that helped. Um, I don't know how much of that I can apply, but I think you know what you take from all that experiences, that sometimes you can piece you can take different pieces of puzzle and then stick them together. So that helps. But in terms of getting a job, I think for me, they were looking for someone who can do technical work also, but who also has some experience in data analysis, things like that. So that worked for me. Um, but I mean, I'm gonna tell you now, it's not that easy. Sometimes you feel like with your academic skills you are a perfect fit for a position, and you just never hear back. So it's hard to pinpoint what exactly makes you qualified for a position. But what you can do is you can do your best in wherever you are. If you are doing a master thesis, if you are doing your internships, if you are doing your courses, just make sure that you know what skills you have learned from these skills, and then you can sell yourself on those skills later on when you are applying.
So usually company do not allow freshers to take these opportunities. So didn't you face this problem?
So freshers in the sense like right after PhD, or
Right from the PhD.
yeah, so there are different. I mean, it depends. I think there are companies who do hire right after a PhD. Um, um, Actually, in the sense, I think it is almost better to apply right after PhD, because if you do a postdoc and do, sometimes you become overqualified, and even if they do hire you, the pay scale you start with, it's not that different if you do right after PhD. Um, but yeah, so you do have to apply to a lot of companies. In my case, for some people it works out. I think the one thing that does really help is, if you already have people from your lab in one of these companies, because then you already have a way out, which is I think happening in terms of now people from colleges like IISER Pune, which were new. Now they are getting placements in PhD is not that difficult. It used to be really difficult to get, because no one knew IISER Pune, no one knew like what these students are. Now at least there is some sort of a repo there. So eventually, if your people from your PhD lab are in one of these companies, that helps. But if they are not, then you just have to find people, network, things like that. So they do allow it. It just depends. if you are a fit or not, and that is very subjective. It's hard to pinpoint what that reason is.
So you get job because some people from your group is working in these companies,
So
like in.
I didn't. So for me, I didn't know anyone in the company. So I for me it worked out. So it's hard to sort of again. I mean, usually it doesn't work. Usually you do need a referral. You do need someone who can at least vouch for you, because it's a huge investment on their part to hire you. But nothing is impossible. I mean, it worked out for me. But I'm just saying that is the easier way out. At least if you know people, if you know at least people who are familiar with what kind of work your lab does, and it also gives you an idea of what companies to apply, because there are so many out there, right? How do you can it's not one of those things where you are going to write 100 emails and then one will return. It's you do need some sort of a fit somewhere. Um, so most of the people that I know from eventually they did end up finding a job. Either it happened through on-campus placements, which is not that common, depending on what group you end up with. It does happen in biochemistry, chemical biology kind of groups, but I was in chemistry in Wisconsin, and they did not have that many companies coming in. Um, but I mean that those two things help a lot: on-campus placements or knowing people in your network. That do help a lot, but it's not impossible. So that's what I'm trying to say from the beginning, right? You will do what you can do, um, as best as you can do, but then there are some things that are out of your control, but you can try to put your best foot forward.
Yeah, all right. So let's move to the chat box question. So there is a question from Swastik, like when you go for foreign internship PhD, do you have to make bank account and opt for telecom situated in that country?
So the question is, while being an undergrad, if you go for an internship, or
No, like
is it
this
one?
question.
Yeah, I think he's
This,
asking for both. So, for example, when you went to Germany for the dad's summer internship or during your PhD, or did you have to make
Sure.
a from there or?
Yeah. So I mean, I understand. I mean, I think um, all those experiences have been a little bit different, but what does help is there are like Facebook groups. There are all these groups out there. They will help you out with all this. Yes, I had to open a bank account there in Germany. I knew when I went there, then I had to go to a bank. That's where they deposit your scholarship. And yeah, we had to buy a SIM. But then again, on like that time, Facebook used to be a bigger thing, so we found a group. There were other people from ISER Pune, they were going, so we all coordinated. So that works out. When I was in my PhD, then my internship was in USA. It was in just a different state, so that wasn't a huge problem. But you will figure it out. Yeah, there's there are a lot of resources out there nowadays.
okay. So question from Riddhi. Why did you choose the US for your PhD instead of Europe?
Yeah. So I mean, at that point, I mean, I didn't wanna, I don't claim to know, but in my mind, there were some other universities that I was applying for, or the field that the research I wanted to do. I just thought that just in terms of comparison, I knew that US university did carry more weight, um, and it was harder to get into. I mean, it was harder to get into. I mean, just all the GRE and SOPs and all those things. I felt it was a little. Um, they were asking for things which require like a little bit more. They required a little bit more criteria, um, and I had done internships in Canada and Europe. Right, I liked doing research in Germany, but it was a little different. There was, of course, a language barrier when I was in Germany. People do speak English, but there's a very large chunk of population they do still stick to German, so which is okay. I mean, which I totally understand. But I didn't know that, so I mean, there were hard to make networks there, hard to make social connections there. So that's one thing that I felt when I was in Germany. So my German professor is sometimes in Europe it's as easy as for a PhD as you can just write an email and they'll accept you for PhD. Sometimes it can be that easy. So that professor was actually writing my recommendation letters for other programs. So he was ready to take me again, but when I went to his lab, it was huge lab. It was like around 40, 50 people in that lab. Like people hardly saw their mentor. So that was one of those experiences I have had. Um, I talked to some of faculties there. I had that, um, that that apprehension about that, if 5 years versus 3 years. But then everyone told me that it actually doesn't matter, and I totally agree. In the long run, that's not a factor at least. So that factor is out, right? So then how do you decide? So based on just my experiences there, I was in Canada also. I kind of knew that I wanted to go into one of these bigger universities, just so that, just as was what I was describing earlier. Even if you don't end up in a lab which has, you know, alumni connections and all that, you will at least have the connections from the university. The university itself is a huge network. There are other campuses, there are collaborations. You can do things like that within the university. So that was appealing for me. So that was one of the factors. And yeah, that based on that. And I mean, at that time when I applied in biochemistry and chemical biology, UW Medicine was number 2 after Berkeley. So they were really highly ranked, and their program is really highly ranked. So that does help a little bit in terms of some companies. They do have criteria. They have their core universities that they wanna target. So that also helped. But it all goes to say, right? When we were applying in the 5th year, we all were really stressed. I mean, no one knew what was gonna happen. So we all had our list of the university because we really wanted to go to some that were safe universities, all of those, and no one knew. So I mean, I can go look back and be like, it worked out, but it was also the thing that since I got the accept from the university, I was happy about it. But if it didn't work out, then I would have gone to one of those universities. But I did not apply to Europe because I was confident that I'll at least get some universities in Canada or US, and I wanted to go there just from the factors that I described.
Yeah, nice. So also after 5 year of PhD, do you extend your student visa or apply for a job visa?
Yeah, so I mean, those are good questions to have and even like eventually research a little bit. So I got done in 4.5 years, and then when I was doing it, so the way US visa system works, so you are on a student visa, and then you get something called OPT. So it's 2 years OPT after that. That is an optional practical training. So that is still a student visa, but you can start a job on that. Um, Once you start a job on a OPT, you have those 2 years to get an H-1B, which is a work visa. That H-1B is a lottery-based system, right? Um, your OPT can be extended for 1 more year. So let's just assume you have 3 years. So the lottery is a lottery-based system. So you have 3 chances to get selected into that lottery. So if you get selected into that lottery, you will get a work visa, and then you will have 5, 6 years of that. By in that time, hopefully your company applies for your green card, which is your next step. That next step, it takes forever, but I mean, if it gets approved, then you can keep on renewing your work visa, and then you can work here. Um, and that's the one thing that I didn't know too much about this before coming, right? Of course, I was not thinking that far in advance, but it is good to think that far in advance because I know of cases where, since it's a lottery based system, that in these 3 years you won't get a visa because it's just you didn't get selected in the lottery. So then you'll have to think of alternate options. The alternate options are you go to some other country, but that also is not that easy. It's easier to start in a job where you did your um, graduate studies from because of those, this 2 years OPT, which is automatic. So in my opinion, if you are looking for not a risky immigration process, I think Canada is also a really attractive option because their visa system works a little differently. So the way it works there is that if you have an advanced degree, so for example a PhD degree, then it's a point-based system. So then you have higher points, and you automatically actually eventually qualify for a permanent residency. So once you have that, then you have a set path there. And so that's a very attractive option, a viable option if you guys are considering that. Um, this can be a hit and miss, this 3 years of H1B.
So you didn't apply for the job visa, just it got extended with time.
Yeah, so everyone does it. So it does. You cannot apply before. You cannot apply for a visa before having a job. You need to start the job. They apply for you. It's a lottery system. Let's say you don't get selected in the first year, you still have your option OPT period, which is 3 years. So the next year they'll apply. So next year, hopefully you get it there. So I mean, I was good, lucky that I got it in my first chance, but yeah, I mean, you have three chances to get in a lottery. If you have a higher degree, which is a master's or a PhD, you have a little bit of a higher quota of getting or higher chance of getting selected in those lotteries versus if you don't have any higher degree, but it's not that much. It can go either way.
Okay. So next question. For PhD application in the US, which is more important? SOP, recommendation, GRE score, or GPA?
Yeah. So I think, yeah, I mean, this is a good question. And I have, when I was doing my PhD, I was in one of those committees and I tried to find the answer for this. It's not that direct. Every universities work differently. Let me tell you this. GRE, my GRE was good, but it wasn't like it was good. It was not bad. But my first of all, subject GRE doesn't matter that much. I don't think um a lot of universities care about that as much anymore. Even for GRE, it is more of a criteria to reject, not to accept. So if your GRE score is exceptionally low, then they just have a system, right? They have like so many applications. How do you just do the first round of rejection? So that's how they do it. But it's not like you have like 340 or whatever. Nowadays it is 340. I think, yeah, probably it is. So if you have the full score, you are gonna get to Stanford. That's not how it works. It's basically just a criteria that you are now in that first process. They do look at your GPA. GPA can also be very subjective because people are coming from different countries. How do you figure that out? I think the most important are your recommendation letters and your SOP. Your SOP should clearly dictate that, and it's an art. No one plans their life in a way that you are applying for this particular PhD position. But the way you write it, that's how you write it based on like I did these things during my 5 years of undergrad, and that helped and that's why I think I'm the perfect candidate for this particular position. I really want to do this, and that's how you do it, and you sell yourself. And your recommendation letters do really help. So your master thesis advisor, and any other people that you have been in contact with, some other professors. It's good to have. I mean, it's good to have if you can, recommendations from people who are more known to that field, or if you have had collaborations from other institutes. For me, there were two from ICER Pune and then one from my Germany professor. So, those things help. Um, but yeah, I'll say recommendation letters and SOP.
So what was the reason you gave for the field change from your undergraduate to PhD?
Yeah, so the way it worked, and it does usually work like that. You don't apply for a specific lab. You do apply for a whole division, right? And some people had this approach, which I think I didn't do it. Some people did it. So some people had this approach where they will contact the lab first, and they'll talk to the professor first before even applying. Most of the time, professors will be like, yeah, you just go through the channel, which is applying through the whole department, and then I can help you out. But I don't know if that happens. But I did not contact any professor. So I was applying directly to the department, right? So then in that sense, you have a little bit of freedom. So you are not completely changing your field. So I with Professor Srivasan, I was working with peptide synthesis, fluorescence. So there are different sets. It's not even if you have a project, there are some skills you can actually try to find 3 or 4 labs within that university that work in similar areas. So you can write in that sense that it still makes sense that you have the skill set that you are applying for those 3 labs, and then you want to grow and you have some ideas about it. So it was not a complete change, and I think someone asked me, right, that if I'm completely theory, how will I apply for something which is all applied? So I think that's a very valid point. You will have to find a balance. You will also have to show them that you can do something, you have the skill set, but then you can extend it also. So it's just a little bit indirect in that sense. You will still have to say based on what you have actually done. Um, for me, I did use labs which were doing a little bit of imaging. So, for example, I ended up doing microscopy and imaging. So I did say in my SOP that I've worked on fluorescence imaging, I've done some synthesis, things like that. And the three or four professors' name that you give in the end in the SOP, they can have some sort of interface between what you have done and then what you are planning to do.
Okay, I think there are a few questions in the chat box, but I'll probably start asking a bunch that I made a little while before. They'll likely cover whatever has been asked before on the chat box now. If I'm not wrong, I just went through your LinkedIn profile, so most of them. You were a co-founder of a, I would say, a startup, I guess. Is it called WiSolve or WeSolve? I'm guessing.
WiSolve, yeah.
So I see that you started it during your PhD itself. So how difficult was it to do both of these? Because I think startups also require quite a bit of time, and it's a lot of time management going on.
Yeah. So so I mean, I think I was fortunate in the sense that my advisor was mostly at his like sort of the last, almost about to retire. He was about to retire, so he wasn't very hands-on. So he did give me some freedom to do what I wanted to do. I had to finish my work, of course, in your lab because you need to graduate in time also. But then I had some freedom, and especially since I knew that I didn't wanna. So one thing I was like, do want to avoid doing a postdoc. It's like even if that means me changing to a non-technical field. So I had to do everything, right? So then I was like, I'll open all my options. So the problem that was that time, right? If you are coming from a technical field, how do you learn these business skills, or how do you learn this other side of um, non-technical things, right? Which happens in industry. Um, you can try to go to seminars and stuff, but it still is not concrete, right? So then what I did was there were other people that were interested. um, so then we started this thing. The startup was basically it was a consulting club. So the way it worked was that we will take PhDs or postdocs in technical fields, and we contacted biotech companies within medicine or within that area, right? They needed help with smaller things, and that's how consulting works, right? Consulting is usually problem solving, so they need help with let's say our revenues are going down. What is the reason? Things like that. And since our approach was that since we are PhDs and postdocs, we do problem solving on a daily basis, and we were offering you almost at like no cost, or almost at the rate where it's not a big investment for that. So it's more of like a learning experience for that. So that was the idea. And while I was doing it, of course, it was a time commitment. But we had a team. So I was co-founder, but I was director of finance. So I just found some position that I was interested and was needed, but there were other people, 6 or 7 other people, and then we started using university resources. So it was a very unique thing, right? That happened to me because my advisor was really hands off. I could devote some time to that, and then I could also leverage some of the university resources. But and not everyone's situation is gonna be like that. Some people have labs, where they have very different environments. Your advisor is gonna be there all the time. They'll know what you are doing. They'll work, so they probably won't allow it. But then there are other things. Then what you can do is that these kind of the club that we start, these kind of clubs sometimes do exist in these universities. So you can actually now just become a part of it. You don't have to devote all the time, but you just learn and you just see where the skill sets are. Even if you can do that, then you can, as I said, you can see that while you are working, can you gain some skill sets that is required for the jobs. In terms of time commitment, yeah, for me, I used to spend like I just used to find like times on the weekends, and sometimes after 5 or 6 in the evening, then I'll devote some time to that. Usually we will invite people from the university, so we were just coordinating based on that. But yeah, I mean, just I had to do it because I was also afraid that after my PhD and that I was not able to find a job, so I was opening everything up.
Usually I see that the at least on Twitter there are a few people who say that the PhD stipend in the US is not very high. Right? Like they say it's barely above poverty line and so on. How was your experience with it? Did you have to do any extra work like being a TA or an RA or apply to some other scholarship um, to keep your lifestyle there?
Yeah, so it depends on which state you end up in. So I was in Wisconsin. So usually it ends up, it's pretty standard, but usually you will end up getting around 2000 or 20 to $2,500 per month, right? In a state like Wisconsin, it does work out. So like if, especially if you have roommates and stuff, it does work out. Um, I wasn't saving much, but I was also not also poor. So of course it wasn't, if you start comparing yourself to your contemporaries in like IITs or BTech, that of course it's not their earning. But I mean, for me it was okay. For me it was okay in the sense that it's okay. It's almost consider it as a free education where you don't have to take money from your home and you can save a little bit. But I wasn't too stressed about it because my whole philosophy was this: like in 5 years, like if you don't get a job, even if you save a little bit from here, it's not gonna last you for long. And if you do get a job, then whatever you have saved is not going to be substantial anyway in terms of comparing. So my focus was just do your work and then just to have enough. Um, so it did work out for me in PhD. I didn't know of anyone in my PhD who was doing extra jobs. So mostly people were doing their PhD because you don't have enough time, especially if you're trying to do other things, to get a job later on. In terms of TARA goes, every university works differently. In the way it worked for our university, you at least had to do one full year of TAing, and you are still researching. Then you the TA and RA. Then after that, it depends on what lab you ended up going into. Some labs have really good funding, so these people don't do TAs. These all things you will decide when you are in the department. You can talk to people, you can figure these things out. It's not the end of the world. Even if you have some, I knew people who did TAs all 5 years of their PhD. It's okay. I mean, you learn something. It's something. I mean, it probably helps you if you eventually are going into an academic field or being a teacher. Um, but in short, yeah, it's not much, but it also is it's not that you are scrambling for money. It works out.
Um, so you had also mentioned data analysis as one of your skills. So when did you start picking on these like data analysis and other communication related?
Yeah.
Was it
So
during a PhD or undergrad?
yeah, so it was mostly during my PhD. So just the nature of work was that. So the nature of work was that we were working on huge data from like single cell analysis. We used to have data like cell length, all those things for each bacteria, and then you will have a huge Excel sheet. So I started like learning some of the scripts, some of the programs that we were using, and then just just sort of learning myself. Things like a little bit of scripting, coding, things like that, which I feel like nowadays just like it's a very good skill to have anyway. Um, I have friends who did it very extensively. So they, even if their project wasn't allowing it, they started. There are so many resources out there nowadays, so they started learning things by their own. Picking up books, picking up online tutorials, exams, and stuff like that. So that's how people have switched completely field to data analysis, because that market is huge, right? So you can get a lot of data science jobs out there. They won't be in science field, but then you can get there. Again, that call probably you can make once you are in your PhD lab and once you see how things are going for you, how much time you have left, how many things you can learn on the job versus you have to seek outward. So for me, it worked out while I was there. But again, also, like, even if you know these skills or even depend on the extent of it, you need to show it in your resume, in your interviews, things like that. So that also is a good factor.
So did you face any kind of negative reaction from people in academia when you decided, when like you told them that I don't want to be in academia, I want to join industry or something? Could
So
your advisor supportive of your stance on this?
yeah, so the way US works, usually people people are usually very individualistic. They don't care that much about what you are doing. But I think the question where it is stemming from is mostly your advisor, right? Mostly your advisor and people like in that thing, like how what they think about it. Those are good conversations to have before you join a lab. So mostly all of the universities, as I told you earlier, you will get admitted and then you will have time to decide on that lab. So if you already know, then it's good conversations to have with people who are currently working in the lab and even the advisor itself, that what's their opinion of industry. My advisor was okay about it. He didn't care that much. Uh, Mostly the advisors don't care that much, as long as you can do the work that they want you to do. Um, when I did my internship during my PhD, so that's very uncommon. That not a lot of advisors will allow it, because eventually, I mean, they are paying you. They don't want you to go somewhere else. Of course, my advisor didn't pay me for those 3 months, but I didn't need that money. I just wanted him to allow me to do it. In my case, it worked out because he wanted to retire. So he wanted everyone to get what they wanted to do. It might not happen everywhere, but as I said earlier, this is a good conversation to have happen when you start.
Oh, did
But
learning, sorry, yeah.
yeah, but I mean, I'll say it's a mixed bag. There are some advisors and sublines which are very opposed to it, and some labs which are really like this is a norm. A lot of people do end up in industry there, so it just depends.
So, did learning German help you when you went to Germany, or when you're applying for that?
Not applying. While I was in Germany, like I did take like a basic course. It did help a little bit, but not a lot. I mean, I forgot all of it later on. But I mean, I wish I knew it, because there were sometimes time when like they will have the whole seminar in German, right? And that was my experience, right? In terms of just social connections and things like that, I couldn't do too much. Um, I mean, it worked out. Especially, it will work out nowadays. There are all these, tools and things which was really hard to do that time. Yeah, it's crazy how things have changed in these 5, 6 years, 10 years. But yeah, so I mean that was my experience. I mean, if you end up there, especially for a PhD program, you probably will end up learning it. So I mean, then you should be fine. But I think it becomes essential. I feel like, especially if you end up in a country like that.
So, I'm guessing a few of you and your batchmates went to that together, like as a group. So, like, did you all find accommodation together, or were you given accommodation within the institute, or had to get it outside and do everything by yourselves?
Yeah, so for everyone it worked differently. We did go as a group, but none of us were in same cities and same universities. We were in different cities and universities. It worked out differently for everyone. For us, the university didn't give us anything. It was mostly that was giving us money, so we found out accommodation for ourselves. For some people, there were accommodations in nearby the institute, but I still think that you had to pay. It wasn't free for, I don't think, anyone. When I went to Canada, though, the program was really good. They gave their own accommodation, so the accommodation was part of it. So that was pretty nice, because we were staying in downtown Toronto, which is really expensive. So I mean that worked out for us. But I don't think that gives out. I mean, they didn't used to give out accommodations, so you have to figure it out yourself. Um, but again, there are resources out there, so many groups, so you should be okay.
So, I'm guessing cooking was an essential skill back then.
It was that's where I started learning. I wasn't good at it that time, but yeah, eventually you do learn a lot of it.
So, when did you start thinking that you have to apply to these scholarships, like the MITAX Global Link scholarships?
I don't remember exactly. I don't know exactly when that happens, like how early you apply. But I mean, I think even when I was there, there was a buzz around it when these things come up. So people used to know like when to apply, when not to apply. My text, I think some people applied. I think I was the only one that went from ISER Pune to my text. But I feel like nowadays, I mean, you guys, I think if you guys, if there is precedence of it, so you guys will probably know when all these dates come. Um, but I mean, it all happened organically. Before coming to Isakun, I didn't even know what it was. Once you are there in the system, you talk to people, it becomes becomes clear to you. I think Dart was one of the internship that I felt like was very based on your GPA. So if you had a certain GPA that you got in and otherwise you didn't. So I mean that also you will know, like if you are falling into that range. My techs I think did have a role to play. Your GPA had a role to play, but then some of the other factors. Um, I think I still had to get recommendations for that and write a SOP or something. Um, but yeah,
What's the kind of structure that's followed in industries with respect to jobs? So, like, you've been in two positions now. So, you've been a scientist and now you're a scientist too. How do they decide what's the role of a scientist and scientist two?
yeah.
Like,
So
do you progress over it?
yeah, every company works differently, but usually once you start after a PhD, again, every company works differently. I'll tell you about how our company works. As a fresher, they have like a rough sort of, responsibilities and what your day to day looks like. Usually you are just, as a PhD, you should be someone once you are given a bigger idea of the project. And then you have certain directions. You can do an experiment, you can analyze the data, you can come up with recommendations. Once you are in that role for 2 3 years as a scientist, you should probably start suggesting some of your own experiments within that project. And then you become a senior scientist. You are coming up with ideas of a new project itself. Then you become staff scientist. You are finding new areas where the company is going. So that's one path, right? Not everyone has to take the, but I'm still deciding, right? Then the other path is, you become more of the leadership. You are managing the team. You're not doing too much of technical work. So that I think every industry usually has those two ladders. Um, but that's how it works for freshers. One thing I'll tell you though, the difference between an academia and an industry job is, then in academia you are driving mostly almost everything. Like you are in charge, right? There is no direction sometimes, in the sense you don't know what's going to happen. What are you aiming for? You just keep doing research, you publish papers, that's it. Here you are aiming for a product. Usually you are aiming for something to release, right? And there are people who are above you, there are people who are guiding you along the way. You are constantly presented. There is not as much as focus on, this has to be perfect, or this you need to present this, or you need to publish this. You are just mostly like things work or not, and then you transfer it to people who are in development, things like that. So it's mostly very structured approach to research. But I mean, it's research, so sometimes things won't go as you want them to go, but at least there is a structure of what you're aiming for.
Okay, so Mohini, I'll get back to your question really quick. So next, I think there is Swastik's question. What's your daily job profile at Illumina? So what do you do daily?
Yeah, so the company works as I said earlier, company works on DNA sequencing. So as a research and development employee, my job is to make the technology better and faster and more efficient, right? So right now I'm working on, of course, like I won't give you too much details, but just working on a project where the idea is to how to almost make the time to get the sequencing done half, right? So that requires a lot of modification on. So the way sequencing works, there's like a basic chip that goes into the machines, right? So the machines are also we make the reagents also, everything, but we work mostly on that chip. So modifying the surface and chemistry on that. So most of my role is, we have this particular project, we have designed some experiments. So I usually do some experiments like 2 or 3 days of the week. Then I do the data analysis. Sometimes I present to the leadership team. You talk to other people. So it's a mix. Uh, but yeah, it's still very hands on. I still go in the lab to work there.
Okay. Now it's Mohini's question. So her question is basically, elaborate. Can you elaborate on the process of becoming a scientist throughout your PhD journey? It's a pretty long journey and takes a lot of time. So how do you stay motivated and focus on your goal?
Yeah, and I mean that's a part of it, right? I think sometimes, I mean, I'm, of course, I'm not as motivated as some other people would have been who stayed and for their lifetime, right? Um, for me, it was okay when you start, like, when I started in Isapur, I had some idea, but I was not that aware of what that journey is gonna look like. But once you are in that system, my motivator was basically like, where do I see myself going eventually? What do I need to go there? And also a lot of times in college, things happen. Like usually everyone is doing things, so that also helps you put things into perspective, right? Based on where you are at in terms of your academic achievements, things like that, where you can end up. And you start making your own path, but you are ultimately working towards getting, like for me, an example, towards getting a job where I can have a career in industry, right? So that also does keep you motivated. If you don't do it, then there is not no one is gonna hand out you a job, right? That also does help you. Um, while I was doing my undergrad, like the first 2 3 years, everyone is just doing their own thing. No one is worrying about that part. Fourth and fifth years, then you really need to think where you're gonna go afterwards, right? That's where some decisions happen. Some people ended up going into business school. Some people ended up going into administrative services exams, all those things. So that's where people sort of diverge, right? For me, I wanted to take a path where I'm like, I still have not explored this fully. What if I can do it? So my motivation came from the fact that I think I was doing good academically, and I was like, okay, I can probably have a shot at it, but um, I can still write it out and see how it goes. So that was the first step. So PhD is a very crucial decision. I feel like if you are gonna do it or not, but also at that point there was not that many options anyway, right? I didn't wanna go into school for something else right away, and then yeah, I after IIT preparations, I also didn't want to prepare for something else. So those were the two factors. Once you start your PhD, then also you have this. It's people say, right, there's 3 years or just 5 years. So I felt like it was almost good to have that extra time, because then also it frees you up a little bit. You don't have to make a decision right away. So then I mean I mean, if you have done a whole 1 year project in ISER Pune, so you are a little bit you understand a little bit about the research part of things, or how those things go. So then I think you still have a challenge in front of you. You have your PhD project, so that keeps you motivated. Of course, there is an advisor, there is a mentor there. But then by then also, I knew that if I didn't keep doing things, then I probably won't get a job. So that also was a motivator for me. People who are in science, like people who wanna eventually stay in academia and keep doing it, I think that they have to find that that motivation constantly throughout their life. I mean, we all have to do it in our careers, but at least for them, it is most towards what that particular problem is, and they have to keep doing it. So I don't know how that works, but people do it. I think some people really love it, which is great. For me, it was mostly so that's why I was okay with changing what I was doing in my PhD in my undergrad, because for me the ultimate goal was to have a career out of it.
Okay. So the next one is from Swastik, but I think yeah, about so during your PhD, I'm guessing you stayed out of campus, and you don't really get to choose who your roommate and all is, right? It's more of
No, I don't. I mean, yeah, you can find friends, you can choose them, but I don't think they assign it. I don't know of examples where they assign you someone.
so the next one is from Riddhi. So at Illumina, do you also have math majors or anyone who's working in a more mathematical field?
There is some positions for biostatisticians and a little bit of that data part, but mostly it is technology company. There are people in manufacturing, but yeah, there are some other fields, but I don't know if math majors, unless you are like a statistics or something. I don't think there are.
No, I guess they're done with that. So since you've also been in the US for a long time now, uh, you probably also met a lot of academicians. How do you feel is the work-life balance difference between people in academia versus industry? Do you think it's better in the industry, or is it very similar?
Well, I mean, I might be a little biased. It depends. I think so. That's what I'm saying, right? If you guys already know, I mean, in research, if you would have seen people going into their fifth year of research, like they're probably like doing long days at research, and like sometimes spending weekends and nights and all that, because there is no clock there, right? When your experiment is done, then that's where you are done. I'm talking specifically about people who do work in lab, um, and that continues through PhD. Once you start your postdoc, then the problem is then you are probably you are trying to get your own funding. You are trying to eventually find a faculty position. Once you start applying for a faculty position, that's also a very tedious project process. Even if you get accepted to a PhD a faculty position, then the first 4 or 5 years are really stressful because then you are trying to get a tenure position. Tenure is that's the process, right? That's when you have to show that you can publish these many papers, you can have people under you, they all have to perform well. Once you are tenured, I think then it slows down a little bit. Um, so to say the least, I think they do work quite a lot, which can happen in industry also. It just depends on what level you are at. But I'm pretty I'm usually very like normal regular hours. I've hardly worked on weekends for my industry um, position. But again, the point is that if you really love what you are doing, which I think a lot of people who end up in academia, they really like that environment, so then it works out.
So another question from Swastik. So when you develop a product for a company, do you get a patent recognition for it or just a higher paycheck? So do they give you any recognition for your contribution?
So the thing is, it just depends. I mean, I think a journey of a product from research stage to final product, there are quite a lot of people involved. It also sometimes there is a handoff. So the way it used to work in our companies is that it's changing. What used to work in our company is that there is a specific research department and there is a product development. So we do the early research and we see that these things might be working a little bit okay, and then you transfer it to the product development. They do all the iterations. They try it on different instruments, and then it becomes product ready. In terms of patent, yeah, I do have a patent from my company, but again, it's not even a product yet. It's just something that that was an innovation. So there is a recognition there. In terms of a paycheck and pay grades, I think there is a performance based bonus. Um, but especially in research, I don't think it has too much to do with like if your project made it to product or not. Some companies might work differently, but it's mostly if you performed at the level that they are expecting you to perform. But there are people who really like who make this transition. They do look for sometimes does this company allow for publications, allow for patents. I didn't care about that part, but if you do care about that part, there are companies who do focus on that. There are some companies who don't. So that again can be part of your choice when you apply.
So how's the work environment at your workplace?
So in terms of what? In terms of yeah, work-life balance is pretty good. My company has a flexible time off policy, so there is no limit as per se how much time you can take off. Of course, you cannot just take the whole year off. But I mean, people they don't keep a tab on it. There is no there is no like time badge. You can it's very research based in that sense. I mean, there are core hours. You have meetings. You need to meet people, but other than that, no one is gonna keep a tab on you, especially in my company, and usually like in other like people I know who have worked on industries. And yeah, it's the company is very good. I feel like in terms of employee relationships, they have regular events. They care about the employees. But I mean, I think no one gives things you for free. I mean, they expect you to work. But in general, I mean, so far it's been okay.
So what is the most rewarding and challenging part of your job?
Yeah, so the rewarding part is this. I mean, if you look at the impact of it, right, as it's the field, how much progress the field has made, right? There is a company called Grail which was part of Illumina. So they are coming up with an early stage cancer detection test, which was gonna use our technology. So things like this, the projects like this, a product like this DNA sequencing is um, has a huge impact on oncology, so cancer research, right? Now we know that every cancer is unique. So how not one drug is not gonna work for every kind of cancer. Everyone's cancer is gonna be unique. So how do you figure out which drug is gonna work for which cancer patient? So DNA sequencing has played a major role in it. So the once you hear these real life impact stories, of course that makes you motivated, and it makes you feel good about your work. The challenging part is still that. I mean, I think I have always been a person where I'm like, do I still fit right there, or is this what I wanted to do long term? So sometimes even I'm like, I don't know how long I'm gonna be in the technical side of things. So I still am struggling a little bit. That should I try to still see that within the company I can find things which also explore my business side of ability or skills a little bit more. So that's the challenge. Like, how do you keep yourself still motivated if you are having thoughts about switching a little bit. But yeah.
So, like last question, like, do you think professor support or assistant will matter in industry?
So if your professor doesn't support you, does the industry care? So let me tell you that the industry people usually don't ask for a recommendation letter. So I mean, it's in that sense like there is no direct impact. But then I mean, if your advisor is really pissed off from you, then they can take you like they can ask you to take longer for graduation, or they won't support you in the way. So that can happen, but usually it doesn't happen. People are very supportive. If not, I mean, even if like my advisor didn't do anything to like get me this job, but he also didn't hamper me from anything. So it was basically my own thing. So it was a neutral sort of a stance from his side, which is I think usually the case. Some professors do help. Some professors, especially if there are alumni and stuff, some professors do help people get a job.
Yeah, it depends on professor and their collaboration with industries and all. Huh?
Yeah.
Okay, so can you publish your research before product development?
Some companies allow it. Our company doesn't care about it that much. They do file patents. They think that it's important. Um, some companies do it. I think some companies wanna like publicize what they are doing. Our companies doesn't do it, but it depends on the company. We don't do it.
Okay, so do you have work more now than your PhD during your PhD time?
I don't think so. I think PhD takes PhD is it's gonna take a major time from your part. And also, I mean, even I am saying that when my advisor was hands off, there are some lab cultures where you are there constantly. So it's gonna it's an involved process. Yeah, it's gonna be difficult, but it's fun. I mean, you learn that. I mean, if nothing, it teaches you patience in your life, right? There are gonna be times when you work so hard for an experiment 2 3 weeks and it's not gonna work. You have to start again. Yes, but that's what it teaches you.
Yeah. So your family must be in India. So how occasionally you come India?
So I've tried to go once a year at least. It sometimes hasn't happened exactly, especially when I was looking for jobs. I think that year I couldn't go. So yeah, but once a year I try to go. Both of my advisors in my PhD, they were pretty good about it. So whenever I used to go for a month. And as I said, my company allows flexible time off, so I just usually do take that 1 month chunk of time when I go back.
Yeah, it's nice. Okay, so you are taking this session at night from California. We will not extend the session much. So
Okay.
I think if nobody has any more question, we can end the session now.
All right.
Thank
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for all your questions. Hope everyone gets successful in their journey. And yeah, I'm happy to answer any follow-up questions. I think yeah, I can on LinkedIn might be the best option, or you might have my email address, Anuradha. You can share.
Yes, we can put your email ID on our website, right?
Sure.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Anurag, for taking this session. It was really wonderful and insightful for us.
Of course, my pleasure.
Yeah, it's always nice to speak with older alumni. I don't know.
Yeah,
I
it's
enjoy
been
speaking with Vikas and I enjoyed this too.
yeah, I miss my time there. Okay. All right. Have a good Saturday and the weekend, guys. Have a good one.
Yeah. Good night.
Bye.